The story follows John, a recent widower, grappling with the suicide of his wife as he navigates a disorienting, isolating, and morally compromised existence. The story unfolds largely through fragmented, emotionally raw conversations and encounters that blur the lines between reality, memory, and delusion. In the immediate aftermath of the funeral, John has a cynical, sexually charged encounter with an unnamed woman who seems to have been an acquaintance of his wife. She is unapologetically crude and uses the tragedy to fuel their interaction, openly discussing his dead wife's illness and their failing sex life. The woman pushes John to feel catharsis, but her words are laced with cruelty, accusing the depressed, dying wife of never caring about his needs. John confesses a fantasy about a young, empty-eyed girl he saw in a cafe, admitting he masturbates while thinking of her. Their tryst ends abruptly when John, unnerved, says he has to see someone. John's next unsettling encounter is with a real estate agent, a smooth-talking man who is keen on selling the apartment. The agent casually discusses the drop in property value due to the suicide and presses John for details about where it happened. In a truly morbid scene, the agent has John recreate the suicide scene in the bathtub, essentially celebrating the fact that the cleaning job was so thorough that it's like it never happened. The agent's lack of professional boundaries and morbid curiosity further contribute to John's destabilization. The next pivotal character introduced is Alyssa, the cleaner. When John encounters her at his apartment, she is cleaning up, which sparks a strange confrontational discussion. John learns that his wife had told Alyssa that John might try to pull my panties down and fuck me while she was on all fours scrubbing. This accusation throws John into a panic and he demands to know the truth, offering Alyssa money to leave and never come back. Later, Alyssa calls him to apologize for making him leave his own apartment and offers to come back. John's situation is briefly interrupted by a call from his wife's lawyers informing him that she has left him a considerable amount of money, something he claims to have known nothing about. This financial windfall is another shock, though the conversation with the lawyer, who is surprisingly sensual, leaves John even more confused. Throughout these events, John is plagued by the woman from the funeral. She constantly texts him and shows up unannounced, seemingly in competition with Alyssa for his attention, relentlessly questioning him about the cleaner. In a confrontation at his apartment, she aggressively asks if he slept with Alyssa while his wife was conveniently on all fours, fueling his paranoia. The story then cuts to a therapy session, implied by the setting and conversational style, where John reveals his struggle to grieve. The therapist praises him for managing the arrangements alone, but then reveals an unsettling detail: John didn't want the ashes to come back home. The therapist then corrects herself, apologizing for mistaking the cause of death as cancer, only for John to confirm it was suicide. The dialogue becomes increasingly surreal. The woman from the funeral reappears, pushing John's boundaries even further. She suggests they fuck in the very bathtub where his wife died and presses him for graphic details of the suicide. John, at his breaking point, reveals that his wife had attempted suicide a few weeks earlier and he had saved her, at which point she had repeatedly said, "I'm still here." He is horrified by his own failure and confesses that if anyone finds out, it will look like criminal neglect. A confusing encounter with a police officer over a flickering tail light, which is interspersed with a surreal, non-sequential conversation between John and the woman. The officer is eerily neat and then asks John to open the boot, trunk, of his car, repeatedly finding it very neat each time, suggesting a cycle or a breakdown in John's perception of time. The woman later reappears and John, completely detached from reality, tells her he loves her, a statement that is met with her disbelief and threat of violence. He realizes the barista, whom he has seen many times, is the empty-eyed girl from his fantasy. She notices his wedding ring now missing and asks him out. As they talk, the funeral woman bursts in, asking why he's with the barista. The final ambiguous line, "You took me," is spoken, but it's unclear who says it and to whom, leaving the audience adrift in John's shattered mental landscape, where every interaction is tinged with paranoia, guilt, and the inescapable presence of his dead wife. A man reeling from the suicide of his wife, as his grasp on reality is slowly eroded by guilt, paranoia, and a series of emotionally manipulative encounters. The narrative is driven by surreal, fragmented dialogues that blur the lines between his dead wife, his therapist, his predatory mistress, and his house cleaner, suggesting a profound psychological breakdown. Following a highly sexual and antagonistic tryst, John is cornered by the unnamed woman who serves as his mistress and emotional tormentor. She questions him aggressively about his feelings for the empty-eyed barista he fantasized about, pushing him to reveal his insecurities. The woman then initiates a cruel game of questions. She forces him to consider violent methods of suicide, dissecting the practical failures of each one: hanging, jumping from a building, stepping in front of a train. The dialogue is a relentless, sickening pursuit of his darkest thoughts, culminating in her demanding to know if he wanted his wife's life to be over. John resists, but the emotional damage is clear and the woman taunts him, claiming, "I'm the fucking affair. You don't get to lie to me. You lie to everybody else, but don't lie to me. Ever." John is caught in a confusing loop, with the woman constantly appearing, challenging his narrative of the suicide. She presses him for details, asking if the radio was playing and if he called the ambulance right away, a detail she seems to know but uses to fuel his guilt. The story then shifts to a surreal workplace where John encounters a group of people, possibly his wife's former colleagues, who are morbidly curious about her death. They admit they were never invited to the service, yet they discuss her intimately and speculate that John was having an affair with his wife's knowledge. They are explicitly hiring a replacement for his wife's old job. The conversation is unnerving and disconnected, with the man speaking to John eventually asking him to leave because they have an applicant waiting for his wife's job, creating the sense that John himself is being edged out of his own life's role. Later in a conversation with the mistress, she sends him a voice message where the background noise is clearly an intrusion, some kind of radio interference or static that no one else seems to hear. She presses him again on the method of his wife's suicide, questioning if she still shaved, wondering why a razor blade was even in their home, and then asks if he still eats the food she bought, highlighting the banal horrors of his continued existence. John eventually attends an appointment with his therapist, who reveals that John has missed several previous sessions. The therapist presents a cold, analytical perspective, asking if the women in John's life, his dead wife and his mistress, even exist for him. John mentions finding the mistress's underwear under his bed, a sign the mistress is attempting to establish permanence in his life. The therapist then offers an extreme piece of advice using a metaphor of disease and healing. John must cut her out completely like a tumor, and maybe some healthy cells, just to make sure to begin his healing process, implying a complete, ruthless severance. The climax arrives when John visits the mistress's apartment. He is clearly unwell and distressed, complaining that the noise, the static/interference, is back. In a violent confrontation, John tries to silence her, physically attacking her and demanding to know if she is the noise. The mistress fights back, revealing that John does not even know her name, and she suggests he is so emotionally detached that she's merely a fucking demon to him. When John again tries to silence her, she taunts him, saying, "You don't kill me. You don't get to kill me. You'd better go now. You'll be late." This implies a twisted power dynamic where she is in control of his existence. John's encounter with the unnamed mistress is central to his torment. She is an agent of chaos, using their physical intimacy to strip away his defenses. After she goads him with the macabre game about suicide methods, the scene shifts to the baffling conversation with his wife's former colleagues. These people, who openly discuss their pool on how his wife died and casually mention replacing her at her job, highlight John's complete social and emotional isolation. His life has become a morbid spectacle viewed by others with cold curiosity, further pushing him into self-doubt about his wife's secret life and his own perceived inadequacies. The mounting stress is manifested in the mysterious, ever-present noise that John alone hears, a static or interference that is a clear signal of his deteriorating mental state. This auditory hallucination becomes a terrifying symbol of the unseen, uncontrollable factors that have destroyed his life, mirroring the lumpy tumor with roots underneath that the mistress cruelly described earlier. When John confronts the therapist, the session becomes less about healing and more about diagnosis. The therapist's theoretical questions about the reality of the women in his life, both the dead wife and the ominous mistress, suggest that John may be losing his ability to distinguish between actual events, memories, and outright delusions. The revelation of the mistress's underwear under his bed solidifies the idea that she is a festering intrusion, one that the therapist metaphorically suggests he must cut out completely like a tumor. This professional advice to commit emotional and potentially physical violence against the mistress reflects John's own dark state of mind. The film's most disturbing sequence occurs when John follows this advice, physically confronting the mistress at her place, demanding to know if she is the noise. This moment is the logical climax of his mental collapse. The internal pressure to eliminate the source of his pain manifests as external violence. Her resistance and taunt, "You don't kill me. You don't get to kill me. You'd better go now. You'll be late," are a clear assertion that she is not merely a person but a personification of his destructive impulses and guilt. She is a constant in his life, one he cannot escape through murder or abandonment, confirming his terror that his suffering will be eternal. The final encounters with Alyssa the cleaner add one last layer of complexity to the mystery of his wife. Alyssa's knowing remarks that she remembers his wife better than you probably, and her offer of her real phone number for other things as well, suggest the wife may have had a deeper, more intimate relationship with the cleaner than John ever knew, perhaps even fulfilling the wife's earlier disturbing suggestion that John might want to sleep with her. John's final moments are spent wrestling with the knowledge that his life with his wife was built on secrets, and that even his perception of her memory is unreliable. The film closes on John's broken internal narrative, confirming that the noise has fully taken root, transforming into the omnipresent, chilling words, "I'm still here," the final utterance of his wife, which now haunts him as a permanent fixture in his fractured consciousness. The movie concludes by trapping John in an inescapable loop of guilt, paranoia, and psychological torture, leaving his fate ambiguous but utterly bleak. If you enjoy watching this video, then subscribe to Angel Recaps for the latest movies explanation.